Hello, everyone. Welcome to, wow, we're in week 6 already. That's great. We're really trucking through this content. I hope everybody's doing well and enjoying the content so far. We have a little bit switching gears this week. As I've mentioned a couple of times, and as you've probably noticed, sustainable building design is an undercurrent that flows throughout the course. And so this week we're really going to dig into sustainable building design specifically. But before we do that, we talk about sustainable buildings, but what does sustainability really mean? So we're actually going to start with what is sustainability? So this is a really broad umbrella, just a short video about what is sustainability. Sustainability is a whole another topic. If you're interested in it, by the way, I do teach a full class on sustainability called Sustainability in Society. It's SOC 103, so it's a social science elective, which most of you can take for your degree. If you have more questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. And that's where we go into all different aspects of sustainability, water and food and so forth. But anyway, we're just going to get a real brief overview of sustainability. But then the really important topic that is addressed by buildings to, well, at least to a large extent, is climate change. I wish I didn't have to talk so much about climate change, but it's important that you understand it because this is the major sustainability issue of our lifetime, and it's impacting us all already, and it will only continue to impact in the future. So it's really important at least to understand the very basics of climate change and how it works. There's a lot more that we could get into, but there's a video here that explains the greenhouse effect and how climate change works, and then there's a great just sort of short explanation from the United Nations. And then so if you have a sense of climate change and sustainability, then next you dig into more specific aspects of building design. And so we start with passive design, which is a set of design principles that you can apply to any building that help you design mostly it's focused on energy efficiency, and basically using less energy, or really what it's all about. Passive design is all about, as the name implies. Right, so it's passive design. Passive refers to it utilizes the natural environment that surrounds it to minimize its energy use. And that's what passive design is. So there's some of these basic principles, which hopefully for those of you that are in the buildings sector, so especially architecture, these are really important. I hope you design buildings that integrate these passive design principles. Climate change is the single most important sustainability issue of our lives. It's affecting us now, and it's only going to continue to affect us more in the future. And so it's important that you understand how to address it no matter what you're doing. And so for anyone working in the building sector, it's the most important thing you can do in terms of the building sector specifically is reduce your energy use in buildings, because something like 75% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from fossil fuel burning. Now, a lot of that's from transportation, but a very significant portion of that is from energy use in buildings. So if we can design our buildings so that they naturally use the environment around them and so minimize their energy use in the building, we can really address climate change in a big way, of course with the addition of renewable energy, and so that's what all this is all about. It shows you some techniques that have been used actually for thousands of years. This is all stuff that we've known for a really long time, these principles, and that includes natural ventilation in addition to capturing ambient sunlight. And then we'll get into a few design case studies. This again, as I said, these can be applied in any context. And so here you'll get to see a modern building, and then a modern but sort of an old school building here that's custom built by a craftsman, to show you some of these passive design principles in action. And then we'll get into sustainable building rating systems. So if we say we're building a sustainable building, like what does that mean? How do we actually say this building is more sustainable than this building, or this building is greener? I don't like that term green, but than this building. So how do we rate the sustainability of buildings. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. So we'll go over a few of them here. So Energy Star is a pretty common one. It's pretty low bar to entry, although it does indicate a very energy efficient building at least. So that's an energy focused sustainability metric. Whereas LEED, which I'm sure all of you have heard of before, if you haven't, you should learn about it because it's very, very common. It's the most common green or sustainable building designation. And so you'll learn a little bit about LEED and the LEED system. And then the Living Building Challenge we'll go over. This is less common. Not a lot of people know about this. But this is sort of like LEED on steroids, if you will. I mean, it is the most robust sustainability metric that exists. I mean, I've actually seen a lot of these. I've talked to people that deal in this industry, and Living Building Challenge is the most robust. It's the most difficult certification to get. So this is the bar that we should be striving to achieve from a for a sustainable building sector. I mean, the Living Building Challenge seeks to completely eliminate the negative impact of buildings on the natural environment. I mean, it's and also you'll see this rating system, which is really interesting, which is available here. It's publicly available. It includes things like very holistic sustainability metrics like equity and beauty and health. I mean, it includes all of these things in these rating systems, and so it's just absolutely robust. And there are only a handful of these buildings in the world, whereas with LEED, for example, there are thousands and thousands of those buildings. They're all over the place. But this is a really, really advanced certification. Then we'll go over Passive House certification. So, living buildings is kind of like LEED on steroids, and Passive House is kind of like Energy Star on steroids. It's Energy Star Plus, if you will. So really efficient, but then even more efficient. And so you just get a taste of that. Again, things are kind of headed in this direction. I mean, we need to make our buildings more efficient, less impactful on the natural environment, and so forth. And so certainly with the energy certifications, everything's headed in this direction. More energy efficiency as new codes, building codes come out. They keep requiring more efficient buildings and so forth. So we're kind of headed in this direction. So it's good that for any of you who are going to be working in that sector that you understand these, at least the basics of these, because then you'll at least have a passing familiarity with them, and you can learn more about them as you move forward. But those are the certifications. And then I end up with a short summary video on some additional, more niche applications, like cooperative housing, which actually there are thousands of cooperative housing units in the world. There's some, around here. I know there's some in Philadelphia. So we'll go over the basics of cooperative housing. It's a pretty interesting model. Now it's not an energy efficiency model per se or a green building per se, but what it does is you share your spaces with other people, because I mean, if you think about it, the average house size in the United States is like 2,000 square feet. The average family size in the United States is about 4 people. So how much of that house does the average family actually use actively on a day-to-day basis? I can speak from experience. I have those exact around 2,000 square feet, and I have 4 people. And we don't use most of the house most of the time. And so with cooperative housing, the idea is that you can share spaces with other people, and you have your own private area, but then you have your common areas, your public areas, even kitchens and living rooms and so forth. And it's a really interesting model, and what it does is it cuts back on the square footage per person, which cuts back on the energy use per person, which cuts back on the emissions per person, and just everything else is lessened as well. Your overall resource use per person is cut back significantly with cooperative housing. And then tiny homes, which is, again, kind of a common movement now. Anything technically, say, under 500 square feet is a tiny home. A lot of people moving toward this as housing prices become unaffordable. So that's another interesting model that's out there, and I think and certainly available. They have some really cool tiny homes if you're into that sort of thing. They have some really neat ones. And then finally, straw bale and cob, which is used in one of the passive design buildings. But that's something that if you're into, certainly worth looking up. They're really interesting ways to build at least parts of homes. Okay, so that's an overview of this week. Hopefully you really enjoy the content. I personally love this stuff. I think it's really interesting. There's all kinds of examples that you can look in this, and there's all kinds of rabbit holes you can fall down once you start looking at this content. And I really hope you enjoy it, because this is, not to repeat myself too much, but this is such an essential issue. Climate change is only going to become more important, so you definitely want to be paying attention to it, and certainly how it's impacting. No matter what field you're working in, it's going to impact your field. But certainly, if you're working in the building sector in any way, shape, or form, CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas emission considerations are going to be central to just about everything moving forward. And so it's important that you have a good basic understanding of this. Okay. Any questions, of course, let me know.